Welcome back to the Meeple Marathon. Today we're going to be taking a look at Role Player Adventures by Thunderworks Games. This is a kind of a narrative-driven adventure game, campaign game, set in the role player universe where you could actually use a character that you have created in role player and then carry it over and play a campaign with them. Now, a lot of the mechanics from role player are carried over into this game. The basically dice manipulation, dice rolling, trying to hit certain pip counts and things like that. This is a game that I was highly interested in when it came to Kickstarter, but one of the things that I've always appreciated about Thunderworks and what they do with their Kickstarters is that nothing is Kickstarter exclusive. Everything that they unlock throughout the game, and they don't do a ton of Kickstarters like CMON or anything like that, is going to go into the box no matter whether it's delivered to a Kickstarter backer or hits the retail shelves. So there is less need for this, having to have the Kickstarter version of the game. So this was a game that I highly considered, but had a pretty high price point. So at the time, I thought, I'm going to wait on this. It's going to be available at some point. And here, I know that this was an incredibly popular game last year, but I was able to get it at a reduced price after waiting a little bit. And, I also got to see all the reviews from everyone and understand that this was on a lot of people's top games of 2021. So this, similar to Hadrian's Wall, was a purchase I made based on everyone else's recommendations, but one that I had already had my eye on to begin with. First off, this is quite a big box. This is a lot bigger than I was expecting it to be. I had not really even seen a in-person version until the other day when I passed by and saw a copy on the shelf of my friendly local game store, and I was blown away by how much content is here. So let's just go ahead and take a look at this content. Oh my goodness. All right. So for those of you not familiar with the white space, what's going on here? Interesting. This appears to just be a filler. It's like an empty cardboard box. Okay. Usually they, pack everything in there. I'm wondering what the extra space is for. But for those of you not familiar with Role Player, it's a game where you are rolling out dice at the beginning of every round, and then there's kind of like a drafting system of those dice. And then you take that die and you place it into this grid of rows where you're trying to match up, put specific die in specific spots that are the right color, and you're trying to make sure that the numbers match up in a certain range as you add them across. And every time you place a die in a certain row, you can take a special action. And so it's a puzzle at the end of the day. And other than the fact that you guys are kind of drafting the same set of dice, and someone could draft a die before you or take an item card before you, there's really no player interaction. So it's a great solo game. That is, again, kind of the base of Role Player. So what they've done here is given us a ton of storybooks. I don't know if you guys can see this, but there's at least 10 plus catalog size books in here. Now I'm sure at least one of these is the rule book. And there appears to be like some maps on the bottom, but man, that's quite impressive. So I'm going to set those off to the side. I'm just kind of pulling out the stuff that I can pull out at the moment and don't have to cut open with the cellophane. We've got a nice bag here for, I'm sure, drafting dice and things like that. So a nice cloth bag. We have your skill book. So I'm going to touch on that here in a second. So this is, for example, an instance of if you have to complete an interpretation skill, you're going to come here and it's going to be a level 1, level 2, 3, or 4 interpretation skill. And these are the dice you're going to have to hit on. And again, I'm not 100% sure, what the various outlines of the dice mean, but essentially, as you go throughout the game, normally skill checks are just kind of roll certain dice. In this game, skill checks are going to be find the skill check in the skill book here, find the level, and then complete the skill check. All right, we've got another random filler here. We've got our Tomb of Encounters. So this is where a lot of the narrative happens throughout the game. This is also wrapped up. Everything is wrapped up, which I'm okay with. We'll cut it open here in a second. But for example, this right here is something that a lot of times you would see in only the Kickstarter version of the game. But these game trays here that they've included in the game are part of every copy of Roll Player. And I think that, you know, the lid snaps on there nicely. I'm not sure if these are game trays or not, but we're gonna have fun organizing this in a second. So, and we've got some coins. These are pretty standard from Roll Player, and then I think these are like points of interest while you're playing. Yeah, there's some numbers on the back that's going to give you your random encounters. And then we have our sheets here. So you are going to be, you know, these are basically paper sheets. They're nice and thick though. You're going to be keeping track of your party, I believe, on this sheet. So whether you play with an individual character or several characters, you'll track them on here. And then here we have more individual game trays at the bottom. So let's take a look at what some of these contain. So here we have a first player marker, which is a miniature. And again, this was like a Kickstarter unlock, but is included in every version of the game, retail or not. Otherwise, this is not a miniatures game. They just simply upgraded the mover to a nice miniature as you move around the map. And then this tray appears to hold a bunch of cards. I'm not quite sure what these little indents are for, but we'll figure that out. And then we have a whole bunch more cards here. I'll be interesting to see if there is any sort of, this all says stop, 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 stop. So obviously we're not going to be opening these up. And then last but not least, in this tray, we have some enemy cards. And again, you're going to have to, you know, like for this one, you're going to want to cover up a 3 with a 2 white die, and here you're going to want a 3 blue die. We'll open these up and look at a little closer here in a second. But again, this game is all about building up your character and dice rolling and dice manipulation. So here are some of the basic dice and their colors, and then you have some of these half dice, which count as 2 different colors. All right, so that's kind of what comes in. Let me just check here. There doesn't appear to be any secrets. Nothing hiding underneath. Okay. So I'm going to get the giant box out of the way, and we're going to take a closer look at all this stuff I've just set off to the side now. Okay, so I'm going to go through all this additional content in somewhat of a logical order here. The first thing you're going to do is create your character. So if you're pulling in a character from the Roll Player universe, you can simply find the portrait here that matches the player sheet. If you're familiar with the Roll Player game, a lot of these are going to look familiar to you, and just like in the Roll Player game, they are have a male and female side as well. So these are used for your character portrait if you are pulling in from the Roll Player universe, or you don't have to have the Roll Player game at all to play Roll Player Adventures. So they've gone ahead and created, pre-constructed some heroes for you. You can see there's a wide variety of characters here, all using those archetypes from the main game, even some new ones, for example. But what's more important is on the back side here is the statistics that you would have gotten from your Roll Player character, but then are going to be important here. You're going to bring these in, and these are going to be your base stats for your character. So once you have your character and then their class and ability, you're going to come over here to your player board. So that's where this sheet comes in. And this sheet here, you can see they give you a pad of them, is you're going to rip one off and you're going to take one of these player boards here, and you'll see there's a slot in the top, and we're just going to slide this in right here. Now you could write on it before you slide it in, but this now gives you an ability to write out and change the numbers and erase them. So this is going to be an ever-changing basically journal of your character here. All the stats are going to upgrade here, and you're just simply going to be able to write them out, but you're not destroying the actual nice dual layer player board. And then again, you can take your, say, portrait here and stick it right there like that, and then you can take your class ability, say you are an assassin, and stick it right here. You know, it just says assassin on the back, but you can stick that right there. Obviously you're not going to be doing it with your thing picked up, but then as you have statistics here, it's going to hold some of those clear cubes that we saw earlier. They're going to sit in these rows here, and you can see that each one of these is represented by a die. This is blue and this is purple. They're kind of tricky to see. I wish they had made this a more clear blue, but this is basically the basic die colors that you're going to get. And so if you need to roll a purple die or have a purple die in, say, your skill check, that you want to make sure you're at least rolling a purple die and not randomly drawing one out of the bag, you're going to have to take a fatigue out of here and move it into here. So an energy, and then move it into the fatigue area. And then when you rest, you take this and you redistribute back up to your value that you have reached on here. So that is basically your player boards and the player cards, both starting and importing. And then what you're going to do is you're going to upgrade your character using these other various cards that are going to come, and you're going to be able to gain throughout the game. A lot of these are going to look very familiar here if you are familiar with the role player universe. So we'll take a look at these here just briefly. We're not going to go through all of them, but you know, again, this is all about dice manipulation. So you can see, for example, here, these are all scrolls. So scrolls were introduced in, I believe, the Fiends and Familiars expansion. For example, here you can add a die of any choosing, I believe this means, and it can become a 6. Or transmute, you can take any die and turn it into a 1. You can take a die and turn it into a 2. So you know, you could see the scrolls here. Here we go. This is add a red die to the dice pool. So before you roll it, here's going to add 2 white dice. Here's adding 2 green dice. So you can see where the more you have of these, the better you are going to be able to manipulate the dice to get to where you want to. This is, you can turn a 4 into a 2 or a 6. Here you can flip to the opposite side up to 2 white dice. So if it's a 1, it becomes a 6 now, or a 2 becomes a 5, or I can't remember what's on the opposite side. So here is, you know, you can flip to the opposite side, a blue or a green. Obviously there's some symbology here that if you are familiar with role player, you should be familiar with some of these symbols. So we've got scrolls, we've got skills, we've got traits here. For example, this is any die, any color die can become a green or a purple die. A pink die, or maybe that's a purple die, can become any color. Here a 5 or a 6 can become any color. A 1 or a 3 can become any color or count as any color. And again, these are all traits now, similar to the skills that you're going to gain throughout the game, and you're going to spend those to manipulate your dice. Here are some of the weapons. Again, this is basically taking a green die and either increasing it or decreasing it by 1. Decrease a red or white die by 1 or 2. It's interesting that, you know, these essentially mean the same thing, but you know, 2 different types of terminology here. Here is increase or decrease by 1, either a black or a purple die. You know, here is up to 2 blue dice, increase or decrease by 1. So here's just, you know, some of the weapons we have on board. And then we have some armor. Armor looks to be giving you a lot of rerolls, and similar to the base game, there is going to be a lot of what do you call it? Armor collections of armor. So like the leather greaves, the leather boots, the leather gloves, the leather pauldron, and the leather cuirass is all going to go together. And then the chainmail is all going to go together. And then the mystic cloak. So again, if you are familiar with the role player universe, a lot of this should look familiar, but the cards are different. The way that you use them is different. I believe they just made use a lot of the artwork and names of things. And then last but not least, we have the familiars here, which look very different in the base, I mean, not the base game, in the expansion, Fiends and Familiars. A familiar was somebody who you had to fill out their row of, and they gave you an additional power when you slotted a die in there and gave you basically endgame scoring points. Here, they're going to give you dice manipulation similar to your traits, but they're also going to be giving you those familiar dice, the ones that are split in half. So in order to get those dice, you have to have a familiar with you. All right, so that's going to do it for most of the cards. Again, we already looked at all the portraits. There is a whole slew of class ability cards here, and you can see that they are also color-coded here. So your class color does make a difference, but there's just a whole slew of these. You know, you can Templar move up to 4 stamina from your Wisdom attribute row to another one of your attribute rows, ignoring the usual limit. Your Paladin, each player fills their Strength and Wisdom attribute rows to their attribute scores with stamina from the supply. So obviously these are probably like one-time use things. Seasoned Hunter, choose a die in the dice pool, then discard any number of skill cards. For each card discarded, increase that die by 1. So again, a whole bunch of skill cards, and then last but not least, the other kind of mini-sized cards here you have are going to be these these modifier cards. Some of these may be a modifier for yourself as the individual. For example, if you're an adventurer, all skill checks are difficulty 1. But if you run into a band of, say, band of basilisk or something like that, during the first round of combat, the combat dice limit is reduced by 2. And they'll tell you in the encounter that it's going to be a band of basilisks. So you're going to find the basilisk combat card and add this modifier to it. So these are all in alphabetical order. Like this modifier could add 2 additional dice that you need to cover up in order, gigantic, in order to be successful. So these are ones that I'm assuming you're going to want to keep in alphabetical order to make things easier to find. All right, so let's kind of move these off to the side so we can take a look at some more stuff that we unlocked here. So as you, once you get your adventure ready to go and you've got your cards and your dice pool and things like that, you are going to be traveling through these. Oh, here's this huge stack of what I called catalogs, and that's kind of what they look like from the side, but there's a side quest here, and each of these are basically the narrative driven text behind the story, and there are 10 of these, all the way down to a adventure finale. So, the amount of content here is just staggering. I know I'm kind of working my way through these backwards, but I just wanted to show off the various adventures that you're going to be able to go on here. And this is just the base game. There's already an expansion that they came out as part of the Kickstarter that you can purchase that mainly adds like some backstories to your characters. But I'm sure that this right here is what they're going to be coming out with more and more of. and I really appreciate the fact that they have taken the time to make each one of these an individual book. One of my few and really possibly only gripe about Madara is that they've gone ahead and thrown everything into a giant spiral bound narrative adventure book, and that thing is so heavy and so hard to manipulate that the pages start to tear. This is much more manageable, and you can see this is much easier to get into and say, all right, I'm going to do Battle at Black Lake, and then I'm going to put the game away for a little while, for a month, and then next month I'll play Terran's Trophy. But you can see this isn't too bad. This is not asking a ton of you. This is like one play session here. So really appreciate how they've divided these up here. But you're basically gonna choose your adventure, and then each adventure, set these off to the side, is going to come with one of these maps here. Now you can see these maps are the material here reminds me of like the Wingspan, the Stonemaier rule books. Very texturized, thicker paper here. Probably not quite as tear resistant, but I know these don't quite all fit in the camera here. But you can see this is giving you areas to, points of interest locations, obviously keywords here. But this is the kind of map you're going to be moving that one miniature in the game around for the Battle at Black Lake. And then when you're on to Adventure 2, you're going to flip this over, and you can see it's a different map for Terran's Trophy. So there is a map like this that's going to help set the scene for each of your adventures. So there's 6 of these, even down to the finale here, which is quite crazy here. Don't want to spoil too much. Or like this one here, I'm just going to show half of this one. It's basically like a giant robot or something like that people are living inside. So some really cool stuff here. And again, this is not a dungeon crawler. You're not going to have to be setting up map tiles and moving spaces. That's really just to kind of set the scene. All right, last but not least, we are briefly going to take a look back at the 2 spiral bound books here. Again, this is the skill check book, and while we're looking at the skill check book, again, these are all in alphabetical order, which makes it nice. We're also going to take a look at the enemy combat cards here. So you can see these are all numbered, so I'm not going to show too many of them off, so as not to spoil some of these real big baddies at the end. But just for an example here, the guys in the front, for example, bandits or basilisk, bat, bugbear, these may be in alphabetical order. Actually, now that I think about it, Captain Giselle, Captain Cayman, or Construct. But let's just take a look at a few of these here as we see if there's any other ones. Here we go. All right, so let's just adjust this so we can talk about these. These are basically going to be the areas that you need to use your dice pool. So you're able to build up your dice pool, and if you don't, especially early on, if you don't have the stamina to use to get the specific die to build up your dice pool, you can see, for example, here your dice limit is 10 if this was a level 4 quickness skill check, or if it's a level 1, you only get 4 dice. If you aren't spending stamina to pick the die of a specific color, then you're just randomly drawing out of this bag that we saw earlier. So all the dice are going to be in there. You may or may not draw the right color. Hopefully then you have some skills or traits or familiars or something that are going to allow you to manipulate that color. But then basically you're going to be looking at the book here, and like this one requires a black 6, this one's a purple 1, and this one's a black or purple 4. So all of them are going to require a specific color. I don't know why, for example, the green is like a double line and the red is like one thick line. Why there's a difference between those two, but you can see, like, for example, this one here means that it can be a die of any color, or this one here has to be a black die, but it can be any number. So this can be a 5 of any color, and this can be a black die of any number. And again, you are attempting to cover up each one of these in either the skill check or the round of combat. Now in a skill check, you get one chance to do it. And if you are successful or not, you're going to gain, say, example, the XP here. If you cover up those two, if you only say cover up that one, you're not gaining anything, and you're going to read the failure text from the encounter book that we're going to take a look at briefly in just a second. Combat's going to be a little different in that you get 3 rounds of combat, and so you're going to have a little tracker that's going to move along these 3 spaces here, and so you're going to roll out your dice pool. You're going to cover up as many as you can, and then at the end of the first round of combat, any of these that are uncovered are going to hit you for, you can see here these red boxes with the numbers, that's like their strike back value, so that's what they're going to hit you for. So obviously if you were fighting this Elsifer guy here, you would want to like cover up these 2 first, and then these 2. Maybe if you got to leave something, leave that black one alone or something like that. Then you're going to get to have another round of combat, but you're going to move your marker along the bottom here, and the round trackers usually have negative things that are going to happen to you the further along you get. So obviously if you can complete the combat in the first round, that's the best. But as you get further along, you can see bandits will steal gold from you, basilisks will eventually deal damage to you even if you are successful. These guys will steal stamina and XP from you the longer you let it go. But essentially that's really all the game comes down to, is manipulating your dice in order to cover up the proper boxes in these 2 types of scenarios. So this is not an overly complicated game, but what everybody is raving about as far as the game is concerned is the storytelling, is the narrative aspect of the game, and the adventures you're going to go on, not necessarily the combat mechanics. So that is, again, the combat and skill checks. Last but not least, we have our encounter book. Now I'm not going to show off too much of this because I don't want to get into spoilers, but what I did want to show you is just real briefly, you can see here as I spin along the crack in the Kublik here, or now we're on the Eye of the Cullis, or Outbreak in the Undercity. Basically they have, this is page 1 here. So I'm not going to keep it open too long, but Battle at Black Lake. So basically they're not making you flip around a lot, but they did want to keep this separate from the books, just to help keep your encounters separated from the narrative storytelling aspect that's going to be in those catalog style books. And this one can lay flat and lay open, which I think is a nice touch as well. So that's going to do it for all of the content that is in Role Player Adventures. Again, there is a lot of content in this very large box, and I'm wondering if the added space is for expansions in the future. But up next, we are going to get everything back into the box. So keep an eye out for our next video covering Role Player Adventures. Will be the reboxing video. We shouldn't need any outside materials to get this back in the box because of all the game trays that they've included, but I wanted to make sure that people understood how it did all fit back in the box in case you were utterly confused, because there's not really anything in the rulebook for telling you how to pack this game away. So we're going to cover that on our next video of Role Player Adventures. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, please consider subscribing to the channel. Once again, thanks for watching. Have a great day.